Yeah, we pulled over for like an hour once and 24 hours, done.
Okay.
I think it's time. So you have they take out their meetings. They don't do.
Yeah, it would be nice to hit a couple spots.
So they conflict on the meeting.
So you're going to where? California?
Oh, well, you know,
So you gotta stop one night at least, right?
I had a, oh, great, thank you.
All right, good.
I had you know, my Honda is from
Yeah, it
Price,
was good
and
quality time we had.
they've been really great over the years.
She's playing.
So we'll leave one for Mary Lou, please.
Mary Lou on Zoom.
Oh, is she on Zoom, then we don't need to leave one for Mary Lou. You can move on.
Yeah, it was,
Anyway,
it was enjoyable. See the country, spend it.
you know, so, I mean, I'm doing, they leave me alone. What this need is,
So,
They didn't even really
yeah, definitely,
call it.
I'm okay for sure.
well, anyway, this, you know,
I mean, I don't know
I just had a
if there's any concerns getting on.
Well, no, we are so short of staff.
Sure. I'm good with a nice hike too.
Yeah, I don't mind that. So anyway, we figured out that last Thursday, I can go up and see if you're here.
Said I want
Out of here in an hour.
one, it doesn't, it's, if it's,
Kind of the ways out, right, to load your clothes out just for that.
yeah, and that's why I'm pretty sure.
I was there before.
My son has my travel card case. I was thinking I was on.
But that's okay, I mean, they deliver, you know, look, I'm up at.
I went to Craigslist and all that stuff. I bought some lady, an old landing.
I think we need some more light up here, I'm gonna read this.
Yeah.
Well, I have this.
And it's,
Here's my effort to read it.
I spend a fortune for those things.
Either Charlie got to put bigger print in, or I'm gonna have to have more light. I'm sorry about that.
And by the way, if you don't.
All right, well, it is after 9 o'clock, we should get here.
Somebody.
And since Mary Lou, are we bringing up Zoom? Anne-Marie? Are we, is Zoom up?
Zoom is off, so,
Is Charlie gonna put his stuff up on the,
well, so, there's Zoom.
well, so far, these cameras must not, oh, they're on. Okay.
Let me get, so, here's, so, the thought was that we go through the agenda,
Yeah,
but that we would do it,
does Charlie want to show some stuff?
we can do the, I'm gonna do a share.
How many people do we have on besides Mary Lou?
Well, we've got Austin,
Okay,
and then we've got, Bob Heffernan, Janelle, Jim Catanock, and somebody's on phone. So a total of 4.
okay, great. All right, well, let's go ahead and get started then.
So, okay,
And we have our guru of Zoom over there.
she's got a new title.
You have to get a new placard for her door. Anyway. You ready?
Yes.
Okay, good. So good morning. It is August the 25th at 9:05, and we are here for a Capital Projects Committee meeting. I believe all committee members are present either in person or on Zoom. It looks as though Austin Kalaman and Mary Lou Wellbrock-Reeves are not with us, but are on Zoom. So, and Charlie O'Donnell's here, and the Chief of Police is here, and so we thank you very much, everyone, for being here. We have a very large agenda to discuss today, and I think this is really going to be pretty much an overview of where we're headed, or where we've been and where we're headed. So if we could, I don't think there's any other items of business we need to talk about this morning, so if we could go, Charlie, largely this is your situation. Let's talk about what the first item on the agenda, which is streets, and an update on Phase 25, which I believe is So go ahead, Charlie.
Okay. Next slide, please. So Phase 25 is a project that came before City Council at their August council meeting, and we awarded the project based on council's consideration to Jerry's Inc. In the bid award amount of $163,404.05. If you recall, this is a project where we're milling and 2-inch overlaying Ship Carpenter Square. So we're going to mill 2 inches, and then we're going to overlay with 2 inches the entire loop of Ship Carpenter Square. We also have 500 feet of the roll curb. If you've been in there, they've got the roll curb. So we've got 500 feet of roll curb replacement as part of that piece of the project. In addition to Ship Carpenter Square, we've added in Cedar Avenue, Savannah Road, ADA ramp and crosswalk improvements, which were part of the Phase 24 project, but we deleted that scope of work from that project and included it in Phase 25. If you go out there, the main emphasis of that work was to improve the ADA ramps at the north corner of Savannah and Cedar Avenue, and then create an ADA landing area on the, Mayor, you know this better than me, the ice cream store on the other side.
Two dips.
Sorry.
Hey, what was that a comment about? I have actually never purchased an ice cream cone.
It's very good.
Is that a comment? Thank you very much.
I would say, Chief, you know this better than me.
I can think of a lot of people that know it better than I do.
We walk past it every morning.
I do walk past it at 6 a.m. every morning, so I'll accept that explanation.
I'm just messing with you. But, in the same vein, when Russ Neal leaves town to go inspect another project in another town, I immediately sell my stock in Dairy Queen.
Right, exactly.
But anyway, that's a different story. So we're creating an ADA landing area on the 2-dip side and a crosswalk connecting those 2 landing areas, one on the west side and one on the east side of Savannah Road. We're also putting a crosswalk in that matches the crosswalk that DelDOT put in as part of the street and multimodal improvements they did several years ago. That looks like it's faux brick, yeah. And we're actually doing that on 2 sides now.
you're going to do it both sides?
Yeah, because what we noticed when we went out there a month or so ago is that the white piano keys kind of headed in this direction on the opposite side, on the west side of Savannah Road, was really worn out. So we talked to Anne Marie and said, hey, let's replace that one at the same time. So we got pricing to do it in that same faux brick pattern.
May I ask you a question about this? With the material that's put down in the crossing itself, will there be any reflective quality to that product?
No.
Is that something that is available in the marketplace?
On the crosswalk?
Yeah.
I'd have to look into it, Tim. I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know.
Yeah, I would second that notion from Tim, in that I've communicated with Anne Marie about this recently, and I have noticed in town here late at night, as well as other crosswalks, I drove through last Tuesday at 10:30 with my daughter, and there was someone walking across from their heirloom, and I saw them, but it was hard. Yeah. And I think, as one of our roles in ensuring that, we're a walking town, pedestrian-focused town, and I think we need to think about that seriously, some reflections or something that highlights it a little bit more.
Let me check into whether this material actually does have some. I said no, but
I don't think it does.
I don't think it does either.
I mean, what we've done, where we've got the actual paver crosswalks, is we've put the thermoplastic reflective
outside
on the outside of it.
Right.
There are also other things that we can look at. I've got catalogs from a company called Tapco that has, pedestrian level lighting and things like that we could certainly look at for that, and then for the other areas as well.
I'd like to ask a follow-up question regarding the material, for example, that was used at the crosswalk of Savannah and Front Street, and that busy intersection. That area shows a great deal of wear also. I've brought this to Anne Marie's attention this spring. What is the useful life for that kind of material? It seems to be an applique or something that's applied on top of the concrete.
It's vinyl.
Or it's vinyl? Okay. Do you know what is the projected life of that? Because
Well, the problem is it's not a very good product in terms of its adherence to the underlying.
I can imagine.
concrete. And I'm looking into that to try to come up with a better solution so that when we repair what's on Front Street and at that intersection, it's done in a way that lasts longer than 2 years.
And you know, one of the things that I have a general awareness of is that it is possible to embed in concrete materials, chips. Right, exactly, which will have that reflective quality.
Gotcha.
And that's the level of my knowledge. I can't tell you a product name or where you get this stuff, but I know that that's available.
While you're looking at damaged crosswalks, you should also look at the end of Savannah Road where it crosses right there at Beach 1. That is all but obliterated.
Yep,
Right there at Ocean House.
right.
From the same?
Yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, between the sand and the sweeping that we do there and the scraping we do of sand, that particular crosswalk is all but gone.
Does DelDOT, given that that's a DelDOT road, does DelDOT have any responsibility there, or is that?
They should.
We can assign it to them.
Well, I mean, so I think everybody's aware that DelDOT has roads, many roads, and within municipalities, there are these municipal maintenance agreements that kind of go back to the 20s where municipalities took on things, and DelDOT's position is typically that they maintain face of curb to face of curb, and everything else is the municipality. So that's why I wonder about what about the crosswalk?
It would seem to
Well,
be
it's
that
inside the
would-
face of curb.
Right.
I would recommend coming from the city manager to Rob Bragg, try that first. Because I know Austin just spoke to him about repair to a catch basin that's settling on Savannah Road. And we didn't know what the response would be, but they jumped and took the responsibility. They haven't done the repair yet, but they said they would.
Good, all right.
I mean,
He's with DelDOT, that road.
he's with South District. So we'll look at that. We'll also look at the options for improving the visibility. And again, there are a lot of things, whether it's something that's embedded in the concrete or low-level light. There are a number of things, so we can, Charlie, we can look at that and maybe bring forward a recommendation.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for that, Anne.
Yeah, definitely. We'll look at
I
that.
think that's important.
And like I said in response to your email, the area at around 2nd Street, between 2nd
Yes.
and 3rd has been brought up before, and
Well, while you're talking about all of that, also we probably need our streets department to go back out and restripe 2nd Street for parking spaces because, and we have that capability in-house, because the lines defining parking spaces are fading or disappearing, and those are just paint lines.
Yeah.
right, so they can, right. Usually
that's a
they do
fall
that at the
project.
beginning of the season, but if,
The other thing on Second Street, I think they may exist, but it's often brought up as an issue with the Bike and Ped Committee is people going the wrong way on their bikes.
Right.
So I think there may exist some stencils there that may warn people, but they could,
Okay.
if anything additional that could be done with respect to that.
Yeah, show those. Okay.
And the other, one more question I'll throw out here is, in your research for this product, if we could figure out what we should expect as far as maintenance of the product, I don't care if it's the chips that are embedded in the concrete or something that's applied, I think we need to put this on a schedule, and not only an inspection schedule where we confirm that it's in good shape year to year to year, or season to season, but that if it needs to be reapplied, that is on the schedule. So we never have full degradation until,
Good point. I know Anne Marie and I guess in the 25% complete status of a sidewalk repair program, so I think it would be a good candidate to fit into that, yeah.
thank you.
We would hope to have something at our next capital project meeting that we can share on that.
All right, so anyway,
So just maybe a little follow-on to that?
I don't know why, these things are funky. There you go.
Yeah, I'm going to charge you guys with working on this stuff, okay? But
That's Kayla's job now.
just so you know, like on this particular project, the two faux brick crosswalks were $10,000 each, just for the crosswalk. That doesn't include the ADA ramp work. So just so you have it in the back of your mind, that's about what it runs for that. They're a little more expensive than the piano key type. So just keep that in mind.
a good visual idea for people to be able to recognize that there is a crosswalk.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
The other piece of this project is the Texas Avenue extension, so that it better serves that final lot. So that was part of Phase 24, that's now part of Phase 25. So the whole thing, again, added up to that $163,000 number. We do have a pre-construction meeting with the residents scheduled for September 9th of Ship Carpenter Square. So we're going to just kind of review. It's not a super difficult, disturbing project. I mean, it's just a mill and an overlay and some curb repair, but we want to fill them in on what we're talking about so they can prepare for the construction.
And that's on the 9th?
Yes.
Where is your,
It's on your calendar, it's on your...
oh, yeah, sorry, thank you, I overlooked that. Is there an issue of staging area for that project?
No, thanks to Anne Marie, not now. We got approval from the Little League that we can use their area, which there's not many materials in this job, Tim.
Right.
So I don't
For
see them.
equipment, I was thinking
Yeah,
possibly.
yeah, it'd be mainly equipment, yeah.
Right. And is there any restoration costs associated with whatever could be stockpiled over there? And that's included in this contract?
Yes. Whatever disturbance is done to any staging area on any of our projects
Right.
is the contractor's responsibility to bring it back to its original condition.
Right. Okay, thank you.
I think Josh just sent something out.
We just scheduled the pre-con meeting, but for some reason, I'm not finding it on my calendar.
Well, it's Thursday, September 2nd is the regular pre-con meeting with the contractor that we
There it
usually
is.
have, yeah.
Yep.
And what time is that meeting with the citizens on the 9th?
It's at night, isn't it?
It's at 6 at the
Yes.
Rollins Center.
At Rollins, thank you.
And so what we did is we hand-delivered a letter to all the residences, and anybody who had an out-of-city mailing address, we also mailed it, and we have a Zoom option as well.
With Zoom, excellent, thank you.
So at the pre-construction meeting with the contractor, we'll establish the actual notice to proceed date, and then they'll have 75 days from then to complete the project.
Great.
That's Phase 25. Any further questions on that?
No, I just would note that based upon the original conversation we had about doing this project, it was a full reconstruction.
Yeah.
And this is a much less expensive project that
Yes.
we're going on into. And so the effort to assess the street and look at it in terms of how much demand it has for traffic, heavy traffic,
Yes.
resulted in a significant savings in this project.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because this is actually year one of the 5-year street maintenance plan, if you recall. We presented that last spring, I think, late spring. So this is the year one project. I'm going to go over the year two project, Phase 26, in a little while. So you're exactly right, Mayor. That was as a result of the analysis we did last year with the radar and laser system and all that work that we did. And it resulted in some cost savings across the city in terms of street projects, and this was one of them.
And so the savings here is based upon an analysis of the foundation of Ship Carpenter Square,
Yes.
that it was better condition than what we
Yes.
possibly thought? Okay.
Yeah.
And that is
Thank you.
heavily traveled.
Correct.
Well, yeah, but that analysis is more of what the existing conditions are, and it does fall into a certain classification, which is part of the matrix of decision-making that we came up with, but the main thing, I think, was it wasn't quite as in bad a condition as what we thought, yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right.
Okay, so let's go to the next slide. And this is a project that's not under construction yet. It's actually not out for bid. We expect it to go out for bid late September or early October, so that I can bring my award to contractor recommendation to council at your November meeting. You probably recall this from previous discussions, but it's a 3 parking lot project. The first one being over at Smith Avenue, which I know the Downtown Parking Committee had many discussions about that work. And it creates 22 parking spaces, including 1 ADA station and 1 charging station. Is it 2, Mayor? I thought it was 2.
It's 2.
Yeah, got bad information. Yeah, it's 2. So we're not relocating that charging station, by the way. We're working our parking spaces around that one so that they can just charge at the 2 spaces right there. We are creating 1 ADA space, total of 22 spaces, including that 1. And the base bid is porous asphalt. We did run infiltration tests over there, and the soils were a candidate to be able to use an infiltrate or a permeable system. So that's one thing. I know we're getting a little on sidebars and stuff, but I just want everybody to be aware that you just can't say, hey, we're going to do permeable pavers everywhere, because they don't work everywhere. You got to really do an analysis of the underlying soil conditions and see where the groundwater is, if it's clay or not, that kind of thing. So just be aware of that as we talk more and more about permeable paver systems.
Is that what happened on Coleman Avenue? Like I noticed there's papers there.
Yeah.
Yeah, so for that reason.
Yeah, we ran a test over there. Well, we knew what the soils were, and we knew it would be a candidate. We actually didn't run an infiltration test on that street, but it's working really good. I've been down there quite a few times when it's raining.
But would there be opportunity to put more charging stations there? It was brought up in our finance meeting the other day that there's a program that if you get 6 of these, you get a 90% reimbursement.
Right.
So the installation of additional charging stations is further down on the agenda. Now, if you want to talk about it as it relates to these specific lots, I'm sure we could do that now, but...
Okay, if it's talked about later, that's fine.
Charlie, I'd like to clarify something. Are you saying that the Smith Avenue parking lot is a candidate for the porous material? It is?
Yeah.
And this cost, the construction cost estimate, includes the engineering costs associated with? No.
This is just construction.
For construction. And that is to bring it into a porous material? That's
The 97,000 is for porous asphalt. Okay, so it's going to look like Bayview Avenue, okay?
Look like
Yeah, exactly, yeah. The alternate that we're putting in is for permeable pavers, but it's significantly more expensive.
exactly.
Like almost 70,000.
Right.
Well, out of 160 is what we're being told.
And 160.
Permeability, great, much,
Same.
it's the same as the
Yeah.
asphalt.
And what about the annual maintenance of that surface? I know that on Bay Avenue, it requires sweeping, it's like a
Vacuum sweeping is what it requires. They
Right.
don't, there's 2 different kinds. There's pressure road cleaning, and then there's vacuum. The pressure actually applies water into the street surface, and you don't want to do that with the porous, with its pores. You don't want to clog those up. You want to vacuum out.
Right. Okay.
We have,
So-
that we have a truck source.
So we have fixed costs as far as the maintenance of that?
Yeah.
Is that correct? We don't have to hire a special contractor to do that? That's all in-house?
We have a
Is it?
vac truck.
I understand we have a vac truck, so we have our own people doing that? I understand, I just want to make sure.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's a good question, because at one time, the city did hire George and Lynch, but right after we did Bay Avenue 10 years ago or so, but
Yeah.
I think the city now has the capability to do it, yes.
Okay, so this requires, in order for the
Porous pavement down, in order to be effective, you're going to still have to take up a significant amount of the substrate in order to get a base in. And that's built into this 97.
Oh, yeah, it's like a 2-foot,
Yeah. Like we did on Bay Avenue.
yes, the excavation, and, because you gotta put the proper stone and everything underneath it.
I have another question,
Yep.
and that's not just, that's just surprise to me.
You thought I was very cool.
My question is, with regards to the Smith lot, are we satisfied that we have adequate lighting in that parking lot for people to feel comfortable using it at night and be able to, because there
Our
are,
idea is that we're going to be encouraging people to walk from that parking lot to any place in town, but certainly to Second Street, correct?
You've got the beacon, I think there's also lighting at the.
I just want to, there is some tree cover there in that glass area that separates the beacon from this parking lot. And we just want to make sure
Yeah, I
that,
know we looked into that a little bit, Tim, and we don't have any in our bid items, so I need to go back and think on that a little bit, but I don't think we need it, because otherwise we would have put it in there.
okay, I'd like to make sure that's addressed before we go forward here.
Okay, I think when he gets organized, when he puts down the plans, he'll add, if he feels lighting is necessary, it'll be added.
Thank you.
Yeah. We just put the charging station and then street lighting added. It's not that complex, but it just adds a little step to it that you have to get the wiring to the lights.
I think there is one light there.
I think there's a pole in that grass strip, if I'm not mistaken, and that might be used for, to provide some lighting there.
Okay.
And I'm not suggesting that this lighting be on all night long. Yeah, I think if we could put it, if you will, on a timer kind of situation where it would be turned off till midnight, that would be.
Let me look into whether there actually is good lighting there right now.
I appreciate that.
Okay.
Thank you.
The other part of the project is right over here on the other side of Franklin Avenue. It's a permeable paver parking area that creates 14 additional spaces for the administrative use. Obviously, it will require a new driveway entrance off of
I don't know
Franklin.
anything about this.
It's
This has not been discussed with me.
Yeah, it's a project that the board took the lead on 18 months ago and put it out to bid with, at that time, we used what's known as the GeoBlock system. It's a permeable system that looks like grass at the end of the day. I don't know if you've ever seen it. It's like these little...
Egg cartons.
Yeah, they look like egg cartons, and then you put soil in there, and then you can grow grass, and you just delineate the spaces by bumpers. But the problem with that, as with a lot of kind of new technologies, is that there's no contractors that do it around here, and the ones that we usually get to do our paving projects charge a real premium, and that project came in really high. So we backed off at that point, but it's been regenerated now as part of this project. But we're going in a different direction. We're not going with the GeoPave or the GeoBlock system. We're going with the permeable paver, which is very similar to what you see on Coleman Avenue. It looks similar to that.
Was this something they discussed in an open session in their board?
Yes.
And is this land that
18
they,
months ago.
who owns this?
Blank land.
church owns the land.
It's the church, and
Yeah, the church owns the
the
land.
church owns land.
Austin's on, he can verify.
I don't know I don't know if there was an easement or just a handwritten agreement, not handwritten, but, just an agreement of some sort between the church and the city/BPW for this parking lot.
I'm going to make a suggestion here that we make sure, we need to understand the terms here before we commit any kind of expense here.
Sure,
And if,
I think Austin is aware of what those terms are. I personally had several meetings on site with the church representatives and other representatives, because there's a couple trees that need to be protected. The cemetery is right pretty close. It's adjacent to the parking lot. So
It's between the old parsonage and the peach-colored house. It's the space between the parsonage.
okay.
yeah, it'll be accessed off Franklin Avenue.
Austin,
And
do you
so
want
it's
to
one way in and one way out, is that correct?
Yes.
So it does not connect to the church parking lot?
The only thing that's going to connect to the church parking lot is a gravel walkway.
Right.
which that was, the church requested that.
Right.
So the idea is that the church will also be able to use this parking lot?
I think so, on Sundays, yeah. Or Saturdays, or,
And again, has lighting been, has that been considered there?
not on that project, no.
Okay. Austin, do you want to comment on what happened with?
But it's not very deep, sorry.
Austin, do you want to comment on the workout that you all did at the BPW with the church in reference to, because you did all the initial work on this?
Yeah, we have an existing easement that's been executed, that we had executed before we went out to bid, and then obviously the bid came back. It was a lot higher than was anticipated or was budgeted. I haven't circled back around with them. I don't have a problem reaching back out. They saw the benefit. They had concerns with some of the tree, the aesthetics of it, the maintenance, because at that time, like Charlie had said, it was a grassy area. So they were concerned about who was going to maintain it. Obviously, all that has changed. I don't have a problem sparking that conversation back up and putting everybody back in the room and at the table to have a discussion and see where it goes.
I'm assuming that the cost for this would be a shared cost between the city and the board?
This is the first time that it's been brought back up that we were going to have this discussion, so I don't have a problem, talking with press and putting it. I don't think it's actually on our capital budget right now, but again, I don't have a problem bringing that back up.
Austin, I have a question for you. Are you in a discussion for an easement, or is this a lease agreement?
It's an easement from what I understand. And
Okay, so it's a flat-
a year, probably 18 months ago.
So I think before we do anything, we need to figure out just exactly what the terms are with the church, and work that out before we would commit anything. And I know that when it was brought up I'm pretty confident when it was brought up at the board meeting, that there was discussion about the fact that it would be a shared cost. And I think you're right, Darren didn't put it in this year's budget. But I do think we need to figure out where we are, whether Mike Hoffman has worked with the church or Darren had just done that on a verbal agreement, I don't know.
One more question for you.
I believe that I have the document.
Okay.
So my question is, this is obviously, if it's a shared cost, it's going to be over $25,000. So, I mean, has prior council already voted for this?
No.
Oh, this is all new.
This is all, yeah.
Yeah, I know, I didn't.
I have one more question for you, Charlie. How many existing curb spaces will be lost by a new driveway entrance being cut on there with a curb cut?
I think it's 2,
2 spaces.
max 2.
Yeah.
There was also discussion when we were doing this about adding charging stations there as well. Obviously, we have both the city vehicle and the board vehicle, which are the Chevy Bolt. And we were going to come off the existing pole and put 2 charging stations there.
So we're having a little hard time hearing you. If you could speak a little more directly to your mic, wherever that is.
I was just going to say, I know when we originally had talked about this, the discussion was having 2 charging stations right there off of the pole, the existing pole. I'm assuming we would probably throw that into this too.
Okay.
And those charging stations would be provided with underground service? It's not going to be an aerial drop, is it?
Do we have to relocate that pole?
Say what?
Can you repeat that?
Did we have to, I was going to ask Charlie, did we have to relocate the existing pole in the original design?
No.
Okay, there's a lot more homework to be done on this, it looks like, both in terms of legally and in terms of the considerations, so.
Actually not, because we designed the whole thing before. We're just, doing the permeable paver. We went through the whole pole thing. The charging stations I get a little funny with. I guess I'd like to clarify with council and the board is, do we really want to put those in as part of this contractor's scope of work, or is that something that the city and the board would handle on their own?
Okay.
And that we could coordinate, because probably the wiring would want to be completed before they start
Correct.
doing a lot of the work on the parking lot.
Exactly. These place the conduit.
Yeah, but I can talk to Austin about that
Okay.
off, you know.
Another follow-up question. Andrew?
Oh,
No, this is,
me?
yeah, you. Someone mentioned, I think it was you, mentioned something about charging stations and you get some grant money or something.
So I think it's through Genrec or?
DENREC through the, I guess, the climate or energy
Whatever.
office. Great.
It's money.
Yeah.
The question is, do all 6 stations have to be located at the same
No.
lot? They can be
No.
anywhere in the city?
It's just a matter of how many.
Good.
Right. Rehoboth just put in some charging stations with, I think, through that program, and I think Newcastle is as well, so this is,
It's just,
So you could do onesie, twosies, anywhere through the city? Thank you.
it's just that if you get more than you
Are
do.
these
Yeah,
the
that's fine.
normal charging stations or the superchargers?
they're the normal. They're not the,
Not the ones that charge in 45 minutes, or?
no, but I mean, they're the ones where you could, park, from a customer standpoint,
Yeah.
you can park, charge,
Right,
and
couple hours.
go do your
Right.
downtown errands and.
And we can meter it too, right?
Well, I mean, so that's,
something that
that
needs
gets
to come up
more challenging. At this point, they are not metered, right, Austin?
Right.
I think if we did something to meter them and to accept payment, there would need to be some sort of third party. And there are third parties out there that do that.
Yeah.
I know, some places, if they're in a public paid parking lot, you just pay the normal parking and the charging is free. So those are details that I think we need to work out with BPW.
And the grant money may preclude charging for them.
Exactly.
It might.
If you get 6 and you
Right.
get grant money,
Right.
you may not be able to charge.
Right.
But that's a detail we'll need to look into.
And even if you could, it would seem pretty unseemly
Yeah.
that we're getting a grant or a discount or a credit, and we're capitalizing on that with,
Yeah,
yeah.
okay.
There's plenty of spots to put them.
Yeah.
Right.
What was that? Andrew?
There's plenty of spots we can put them.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so I think there's a lot to learn about the Franklin Avenue piece.
Well, yes and no. I know we do a lot of coordination with the church. I mean, we actually have a plan of what the cemetery growth area is, and we worked this parking lot around that, and kept, separation, certain separation.
Interesting choice of words, Charlie.
I mean, they actually do have like an area where they want to, and there's not much left actually, but, but anyway, we coordinated the design around that, so I'm certain the church is well aware. They probably do need to be brought back up to speed that we're considering it again.
I
Was this-
think, go ahead.
Was this done with the previous minister or not? Or
That I don't know.
was it done with the new minister there?
How long has the new minister been there?
Maybe I'll think it is.
2 years.
Yeah, maybe within,
About 2 years.
it's about 2 years. So when was this done? Do you have any idea, Austin?
So I have signed, I have a 2020 document, so I'm gonna guess like 2019, end of 2019, beginning of 2020.
Okay.
That's under the-
That's probably under the new minister's
Rain.
tenure.
So I think that the big issue from the city's perspective is that this is not something that has really been on the city's radar.
Right.
I know the last time we talked about employee parking here, you all encouraged us to have our staff, hey, we're doing it, we're doing it.
I'm impressed.
To have us park down at Franklin.
Right, you are.
And Schley.
Right.
And, we have, a number of us are doing it.
Yeah.
On rainy days, or if we're running late, it could.
I thought it was not going to be a number. I thought it was going to be everyone do that.
Well, so right now,
there's no local option.
there's on-street parking
Yeah.
that people use. And, the church had agreed that we could continue to use 10 or so spaces over there back a couple years ago because pretty much everybody used to park there, and they wanted us to limit the number. So I think between parking down there, parking on the street, and 10 or so spaces in the church lot. I mean, I haven't heard anybody complain.
I think, yeah, we would hear. I think former council member Buffet is still on the board over there, so I'm sure we would hear. Okay. All right, so that, we moving? Yes.
Okay.
I think we need to, we're already,
Yeah, I got you.
we haven't gotten off the first item here, so.
You know, a really important thing to remember on this particular parking lot at Franklin, we put permeable paver, brick paver as the base bid, and we're having porous as the alternate because we felt like the permeable would fit into the surroundings better, the brick would fit into the surroundings better than just black, but it might be a cost thing that we need to consider once the bids come in.
No, I think the aesthetics are an issue there.
Yes, that's the reason why we did that.
Okay.
Not so much.
Consider it.
Schley Avenue, I think everybody's pretty aware of what's going on. We're basically rotating the existing stone parking lot 180 degrees, so it will front onto the Schley to end of Franklin side. Some good news, we discovered that we can basically use all the stone that's out there now as the base and pretty much just cover it with 2 inches or 2.5 inches of the blue chip stone. The blue chip stone is what's used in the canal front parking lot. That's between the net house and the tennis courts. So it's a nice looking stone look. So that's what we're planning on doing there. We will have some asphalt because we have to create an ADA space. There'll be one ADA compliant parking space that'll be asphalt.
Right.
And then it'll be part of this project, we're actually creating ADA ramps on Franklin Avenue and crosswalks to connect the parking lot in that ADA space to the sidewalk system on Franklin Avenue. There is lighting on this project.
I noticed that.
Yes.
Thank you, Charlie.
Yep. There's also landscaping, which we actually have a plan together that we want to go over with the city.
Actually, we've gone over it with the neighbor already.
Yeah, definitely. We've talked about the fence and the landscaping and the layout with the.
I look forward to seeing that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And then there are 2 charging stations down there now, but anybody who's been down there knows that they're closer to the old power plant side of the existing parking lot, so we have to relocate those to this parking lot.
Okay.
So that's a $90,000 cost estimate. And again, we'll work through these. I'm looking to get this back to you at the November council meeting with bid award.
Okay.
All of these will come back on in November?
Yeah, it's all one project.
Yeah, but the first and the third have already been considered and put into this year's budget.
They have, because those part of the.
The Franklin Avenue piece has not.
You got all in there, yeah.
Right.
Is it, I mean, I guess the question is, if you come back with bids and the decision of council is to move forward with Smith and Schley but not Franklin, is that going to be a problem from the bid perspective?
No, because, I mean, we'll have legal language in there that covers the city, we always do, in terms of picking and choosing which parts of the bids, and they'll be separated out, so you'll be able to see what the costs are separately.
It may be better to put Franklin as a bid alternate, adding it, because it will also be a shared cost under the current agreement. The other 2 we're doing as a city.
We'll call it a bid alternate.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think we would do Franklin that way, because it hasn't really been vetted here, and because of the shared cost, I think.
I didn't know that.
Okay.
Joe, is it okay if the city shares these slides attached to today's agenda? Is that okay? I know they're GMB slides, but.
They're attached.
Oh, really?
They should be attached.
They weren't this morning.
Well, I had asked Janine to add it, so maybe it hasn't been done yet.
Okay.
I appreciate that.
Right.
Yeah, that's good. We're covering it now, so.
Okay.
And Charlie, one more question about this, and I promise this is my last question.
Of the day?
No, just about page 2.
Charlie.
Just about page 2. For the kind of work, paving work that is being done here, is there a reason to expect that a contractor will be able to provide the services that are being, or the kind of job.
The variety of it?
Right, exactly.
Yeah, definitely, yeah. Sure, yeah. Yeah, contractors like George and Lynch, even Tier would take this on, I think, and David Jerry's would easily be able to do all those varieties of work, yeah.
Well, they might have a subcontractor who would help them, but they would.
Yeah, well, but Tier did that parking lot that's down on Schley Avenue now. It was a ad alternate to some previous project, I can't remember, but, yeah, they would probably sell a lot of it.
Right, and the reason I'm asking that is that I was wondering if, in fact, there might be reason to actually break these into 3 different bids. And that would, well,
I think you get better pricing, though.
If you do,
that's
do it
possible.
together.
It's possible, but again, it just depends if they have the expertise to achieve the end product.
It has a lot to do with the cost.
And recall, we are breaking it out into 3 different.
Separate bid items, schedules, so
understand.
you'll see those numbers separately.
I understand. Thank you.
Someone may be higher on Franklin than they are on the others.
Right.
All right, let's move on to the next slide, please.
We'll be here next year.
Excuse me? Thank you, Carol. So everybody's aware of the Rollins Restrooms Edition project that started construction last week with Harper and Sons. The contract amounts to $289,512. In the agreement, it has a 120-day contract completion, and the start date was August 18th, 2021. Everybody's been down there by now since last week. They've excavated out and they're starting their work. And
I was there last night. Do they have to close off the whole entire thing?
Parking lot?
Yeah, well, since I go there every day with the dog,
Yeah,
they have it fenced off, and I wonder why do they have to fence off the entire thing? I can understand where they have this stuff over here.
I thought they just.
And we know
They have
Where they-
they have 2 fenced areas, one where they have their storage and then one right around the, where
they have
the
a
activity.
gate that
I thought that,
comes across.
as of yesterday, there was still ability to park there.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can park in the front part of the side parking lot, but they've got to utilize that back part
Right.
as their staging area.
Got it.
And we had a little bit of an issue today, but we've reminded them that they should park back there too to keep those front spaces open to the public.
Correct, that's been an issue.
Right, so, and that was addressed this morning.
Yep.
Okay.
Well, the other thing is just, there will be a temporary closure of the lot when they make the sewer tap.
Yeah, the sewer tap's out in the front though.
Yeah, but you have to come across,
Yeah.
you'll actually disrupt the.
There'll be some disruption when they make both the water and the sewer taps out front, yeah. So we'll have to coordinate that. There'll be some disruption when they make the sprinkler tap on the inside, but we'll coordinate that. We know the museum is closed on Monday, so we're trying to work all that around those days.
But the sewer tap will be the where the water tap will be.
Yeah, I mean, that's a one day. It'd be nice if we could do that on a Monday, because, it's just at the most a one-day thing, so, yeah.
I anticipate that all the material, the construction.
Materials will be able to be staged within those 2 areas that have been fenced off now.
I'm going to defer to my architect on the project, Dean Townsend, so.
Let me actually jump up to the mic here. So far, we've been working with them, and it seems like there has not been any logistical issues brought to our attention yet. We're trying to work with them to make sure that everything can be stored there on site and within those contained areas. But we'll address it accordingly as it comes up.
Okay, thank you, that would be helpful. Appreciate it.
I have a question, maybe you might be up there. When you talk about these like 75 or 120 days, are they building in like weather and things like that into that? So is it potentially they could be done earlier?
Right, they do have flex space built in.
Right,
It's a little bit overlap too with some of the other items, so it is kind of spread out to at least accommodate that.
Great.
Ultimately, the big factor for them right now is availability of materials, just for everything associated with the pandemic.
Okay.
So,
But we're not anticipating at this point in time any kind of change orders in our design, correct? So that should not become a
Well, we had a deduct change order.
correct.
deduct.
Yeah, it was because we originally had the sprinkler connection out to the main in Adams Avenue, but we discovered that it actually could be tapped into the existing sprinkler system inside the existing building, which saved all that pipe run. Yeah.
Yeah,
Those are positive changes.
and that's reflected in the 280.
No, that's the base bid, yeah.
Yeah,
So that was like 4,000 or something?
4,500, I think.
Yeah.
Correct, it was about 4,500.
Thank
The
you.
city's getting credit back for that. Also on that note, they are working on another one that was brought to our attention with the electrical, so there might be another potential cost savings and credit back for you guys on that, too.
Okay. Wonderful. But the transformer that's there, sitting outside, that is completely outside the...
Correct,
It
that's
doesn't
staying
even
where
have
it
to be
is. We're not
relocated,
touching it.
correct?
Yep, that's
Right,
staying
and-
where it is.
Right, thank you.
Yep.
That was a big part of what we
The deal was to minimize the disturbance to the existing facility.
Right, thank you.
Okay, next slide, please. Thank you, Dean. So I just want to, I know we've been through Monroe Avenue as part of other capital project committee work, but I just want to go through this because we actually are going to be starting the planning part of this project soon. It's a 3-street corridor, Monroe Railroad, and there's a little bit of Adams Avenue that needs to be repaved between Kings Highway and where we left off the Adams Avenue project 5 years ago. So that's part of this project. I can't tell you a whole lot about what Monroe Avenue is going to end up looking like because we want to have stakeholder input before we really put pencil to paper because that whole corridor has changed so much over the last 5 to 10 years with the library, the new library, the museum, now White's Palm Meadows, presumably moving forward, and the intersection signaling and everything. It's going to be different, so we want to get a lot of different input on what we all want that to look like at the end of the day. There are challenges. I've been through those before. The right-of-way is only so wide. Existing residents utilize the right-of-way for various purposes along that stretch, so we need to work with them as well. On Monroe Avenue, there will be underground utility work necessary to update and upgrade those systems, sewer and water. The gas already runs through there, correct, Mayor? So we'll have to work around that. It'll probably end up being curb and gutter with the road, and we'll have to consider on-street parking somehow. That'll be all part of the planning exercise. Just so you know, Emily and I are really talking about bringing a pretty good variety of people to our stakeholder meetings. Residents, council members, BPW members, but other stakeholders like the library, the museum, and everybody else who might have an interest in how they utilize that corridor.
Would that include the developer of Old Town?
We could definitely include,
Because the second question I have is, could we condition, I know Glenn's not here, but is it reasonable to expect that we could condition some of this work to the developer in that not only the construction element, the wear and tear that will take, but the future of consideration of if that neighborhood wasn't there, we wouldn't potentially need to design it to certain standards that we now are because that neighborhood is going to be there.
We could try.
Interesting question. Good question. I have a suggestion, and it's also a question. And that is, with respect to the infrastructure and the underground work, has there been any consideration about conversion of any overhead electric and also communication facilities to underground, so that section of Monroe, we're working towards modernization, we're working towards that, keeping that in mind?
Yeah, I think it has been briefly considered in the sub-planning phase of this project, but it would be something that we want to talk about.
That would be
because the poles, it's expensive to do that.
I'm aware of that.
Yeah, and then there's O&M issues as well, and Austin can speak more to that. But the poles where they're located can be a little bit of a conflict with maybe what the goals of the street and the curb and gutter and the sidewalk would be. Let's just leave it at that. They might be like in the middle of the sidewalk per se.
Right. I'm familiar with that kind of engineering and that kind of requirements, and I'll be happy to talk to you about that offline.
Yeah. What we started to do on projects, and this might be a candidate for it, is to actually put conduit in for future period street lighting. I know we did that on Madison Avenue.
Exactly.
And that might be something we want to do on this
Right.
I know we didn't put those lights in on Madison Avenue, but the conduit's there if we ever want to.
Right.
Good. Thank you.
So Adams Avenue is going to be probably a mill and overlay, and then Railroad Avenue, it doesn't have the utility challenges. The utilities are actually good sized and good age and everything. But if you've driven that stretch between Monroe and Adams on Railroad Avenue, it's an odd stretch of road in terms of the city, and it's narrow. The sidewalk on one side is 15, 20 feet off the edge of the paving. The sidewalk on the other side's got the old driveway transitions that you feel like you're dropping off a cliff,
Yep.
which is the old design, 30, 40 years ago or whatever. And obviously, we've changed that out to, a more slight driveway depression. So there's a lot of work there in terms of pretty much what's going to be the city's effort on that project.
On Railroad.
On Railroad, yeah. We've estimated from the city's perspective $1,001,000
For the entire project.
for the entire project, all 3 streets, and then my BPW rough preliminary estimate is $1 million for their utility work, but I need to firm that up. That's just giving you some order of magnitude number.
And we've been talking about breaking this into 2 projects.
Yes, that's a good point, Mayor, yes. We would do Railroad and Adams as probably phase 1, and then Monroe as phase 2 to spread the cost over several years. And but we want to do the design all at once because they're integral to each other.
Yeah.
Well, to some extent, when you did the previous section of Railroad, you did some preliminary designing for this interview.
We did, yeah.
And also, when the trail was created, there was some work from on Monroe out done, but there's still more work out there that will be part of the project with Delta.
So,
Is that preliminary engineering still applicable to current conditions?
To be determined through our planning. I certainly hope so, because we improved that whole intersection at Railroad and Monroe when we did Madison
Railroad.
And Railroad between Madison and Monroe several years ago. So if you go down there, that whole intersection's improved, including all the ADA ramps and the sidewalk radiuses and everything. So I hope so, but it's going to depend on what we come up with.
Thank you.
I fully support the idea of breaking this into 2 projects because of the impact on the budget. I would just note that unfortunately, Monroe is all alligated.
Yeah, it's in bad shape. Yeah.
It's in very bad shape between Kings Highway and Railroad.
we did get a request through the chat that we all use the mics. Now, I just got a message that Charlie's sounding a little muffled. It could be you're actually a little too close to the mic.
Seriously.
All right, Charlie.
All right, so that's the Monroe Railroad Adams corridor. Let's go to the next slide.
So I don't know, the microphone is definitely picking up Charlie. For some reason, it's coming muffled, but I looked at the inputs into the thing, and it's in the range it should be. So maybe if you just kind of pull back just a tad from the
I
mic.
feel like sometimes it's on and sometimes it's not.
And that's true. That I've noticed sometimes.
Yeah,
But it is the
Mary Lou, can you hear Charlie?
like Tom Panetta did.
She's got her thumbs up, so
Okay, good.
thank you.
All right. I'm going to try a little further back, Mary Lou. I've been told to.
Sorry.
Back off.
So can I go to the next slide, please?
This is it.
Thank you, Kayla.
This is your
Next slide, Dan, I'm sorry. Yeah, so the last one that I want to talk about, and Dean needs to give you a little update on the police department too, is we talked about that we have a 5-year maintenance plan on streets. This project, Phase 26, obviously I presented Phase 25, which is under construction, in the construction phase right now. Phase 26 will be next year project. It's based on, by the way, the $135,000 per year total project cost, which is construction plus engineering, legal, and administrative fees. So that's something that we all talked about last year as we set our budget at $135,000 per year. So you'll see that this project includes 4th Street from Park Avenue to Chestnut, full width mill and overlay, and then Marina Drive, which is just the first block basically from Pilottown to University. Same thing, full width mill and overlay. And I'll be back before council, to present this project before we move very far on it all. It's not even one that we've put, started designing. We won't until next year sometime.
Okay, great.
Okay.
Thanks.
Okay. Do you have a suggestion, Tim?
No, I was going to ask a question, but... Yeah. Khalil asked me, put me up to this one. The question is this. Speaking about that same area of Marina Drive, I know there has been discussion for several years about Ocean View in the adjacent community, right? And where is that? I thought that was in our Phase 24, Phase 23 to do that.
It's such a huge project that it's kind of keeps putting...
Right.
Well, but is it possible to put it into smaller pieces? If it's a matter of budgeting...
I think it is in the spreadsheet that...
In the 5-year plan?
Right, but I think the issue is that it was based on our previous, before the citywide street assessment was done, it was higher on the list, but that was based on timing. That was a kind of a 20-year plan looked at a number of years ago. With the citywide street assessment, other things rose above it, and Ocean View is broken down into smaller chunks. And I think that you said that it would be just beyond the 5-year horizon.
It's not in the 5-year plan. Yeah.
Right, and the reason it's not in the 5-year plan, because I remember we went through this before, was that we bumped the annual amount down to 135 because we knew we were doing this other large capital project for the Monroe Railroad Adams area that's $1 million, so we wanted to get through that, and after that we can bump up our annual amount for maintenance, but given that there's a finite amount of money available and we need to get this larger project done, the other capital maintenance is, we're looking at more $135,000 a year.
Yep, and that's an important thing to remember is that we have projects that are, street projects that are within what I call like minor capital improvements, like Phase 25, Phase 26. But when the city has a big project like the Monroe Railroad Corridor, that falls outside of that $135,000 per year budget, obviously.
Right. So
There are not many of them left, by the way, but there are a couple.
But the Ocean View Pilottown Village project would always fall outside that 135 cap.
No, actually, when we did the study, it came back more into the maintenance schedule, but let me double check that, Tim.
Yeah, that would be helpful, because in my mind, it's not clear how we distinguish between maintenance and capital projects versus maintenance, and I
think they're all maintenance, but to facilitate it in my mind, I always felt like Phase 25, we're spending almost $170,000. To me, that amount of money says capital, even though it's a maintenance project. And that's sort of the same for all these phases. They're just such a high dollar amount that it's capital monies versus...
And that's consistent with the guidance from the auditor. I think that they had said anything over $10,000, is that right? Should be counted as a capital expense. So while it's maintenance, it's capital maintenance. I mean, you're never going to have street maintenance that doesn't rise to the level of being capital.
I would just add one other thing. You know, I think all this is good to talk about, but I think if indeed the infrastructure bill goes through, it's being considered at a federal level, we may have an opportunity to really capitalize on some of these larger projects. So we can't just shelve them.
Right.
We need to make sure that we continue to work on designs for them, at least preliminary designs.
Gotcha, yeah, I mean, they're all on the list.
Yeah,
So,
they are,
yeah.
but the idea that we just, if we can work as you have time, and I mean, certainly designing as you're planning to do, the Monroe Adams Railroad project as one project, having that done, if we were able to access federal funds to help us with that.
Sure.
We could do it as one project.
And so I think what Ted is speaking to is that idea of the shovel-ready, what's called the shovel-ready projects. If we have them on the shelf, ready, if the funding is made available.
I mean, we don't know, but
Right.
No, I got you. I do believe that the Monroe Railroad corridor will be shovel-ready because we're getting started now, and I don't see that money, well, you guys probably know better than me, but I see that actually being available to the city and the board, no sooner than 6 months, probably a year.
Right, it's definitely not going to be available before spring. So if we were to get federal funds for that project, what we could then do is our annual city maintenance, capital maintenance for streets could move up from that 135 level to a $250,000 level, or one of those other levels we looked at. So,
anyway, just keep it on.
and then the one street project that Charlie didn't cover is however we determined to deal with that Jefferson Apartments Bay Breeze situation,
That's a separate.
which we are meeting with the HOA this week to kind of start that discussion.
I don't know if you want to have Dean just give a brief update on the police department.
That'd be great.
It's part of the agenda.
All right, cool. Thank you, guys. So as Charlie elaborated, we actually conducted the police department report for your guys' City of Lewis Police Department. Essentially, the whole report, just to synopsize it down, we did assess local as well as regional examples of police departments to really get a sense of the needed programmatic requirements, as well as we did solicit responses from the actual members of the police department just to see what they really needed. To really just pare it down, we are aware that you guys are occupying a really tight space over there. It's estimated to be about 6,000 square feet. Honestly, a lot of the needs in the region here, usually around 9,000 square feet, and what that translates to, a lot of the spaces are being doubled up and used for multiple functions, so there is an office shortage. Storage that you typically guys would have is now ending up in the hallway, which is a life safety hazard. There is issues with processing and holdings, especially the big key takeaway that you guys really are going to be locked in with, especially at this site here. It's just a limit about site space, but with that processing and holdings, one of the things that is really missing from your guys' department that they really need is a sally port, just a controlled, secured space, not only for the maintenance of cars, but also for the transport of people that are being detained. So, long story short, there are a lot of missing things for the police department. And it is our best recommendation, you know, especially for your guys' needs, the limited site space as well as limiting parking, that we do advise that the City of Lewis actually invests in the most part to seek forward efforts to actually relocate Lewis Police Department to a different site, one that is a bit larger that can actually accommodate all those needs as well as parking and site work. In the interim, as of last week, we were brought to our attention of some issues with flooding in the basement. We did go out and assess it, and our structural engineers, as well as myself, we just were out there to actually evaluate the floor. So far, structurally, the slab seems fine. There's a crack, but, you know, within reasonable tolerance of the structure itself, there's nothing out of the ordinary of the structure that is currently there, but we do have concerns that there's potential that the whole system, in particular the actual stormwater system that is existing there, is a little too inundated. One, from all the actual storm, the gutters and downspouts feeding into it, the existing French drain, and possibly some other connections throughout the site itself. Right. So we have been assessing that. We are looking into it. We are currently looking into a geotechnical report to actually confirm the issues with groundwater, see if that is also contributing to it as well. which we believe is possibly a combination of both, but we are looking into those.
Improvements to the facility right now?
So we've got, so I don't know if you've got anything, but we did have our maintenance staff develop some. Did you have anything other than, so GMB is evaluating kind of the roof drain system, and are there places to run the roof drains that will not then go into the sump pump that could then back up? So
Is that the current situation, that the roof drains are draining into the sump pumps in the basement?
Combination of that, as well as the floor drains around the property itself, and then also even possible groundwater.
Well, you mentioned the use of French drains on the property.
There are existing fresh drains.
Right, and I am not an architect, I'm not an engineer, but my familiarity with French drains, pardon?
You're not an engineer?
Is that they're typically used in areas where there is earth and exposed earth, not a building that is hard up against a driveway, a curb line, and sidewalks. Am I mistaken?
It goes either way. Usually it's also in areas that have water issues in general.
Right, and it's not done with a retrofit, in other words. That would have been done in the original engineering and design of the building, correct?
Correct, and they are existing, at least going by drawings that we have of it. So in terms of that recommendation of the French drains is almost mute because they're already there.
Correct.
The next part of it is more or less, can we find a way to redirect it beyond just doing it, the actual pump itself, if there's other strategies of capture storage there, or if we can even redirect it, I guess, to an adjacent spot further away from the building, which we are looking into those options.
Wow. Another question I have for you. You mentioned that your basic recommendation is to explore relocation. How much land how large a lot would be necessary to meet this 9,000 square feet? I assume that your recommendation for the design of the building would be around 9,000 square feet with the solid port, et cetera.
Correct.
What kind of acreage are we speaking of?
That's a good point. A lot of the ones that we did come across, they usually had a large sum of land already. If I recall right, Berlin had a large one that they subdivided, but I believe they retained about 4 acres of land, if I'm not mistaken, which I think even that was still a little bit too generous. They still had a bit left over, but that was also for any future expansion needs.
Sure.
So that was a good target. I believe the other example, Del Mar, give me 1 second here.
What other cities did you visit?
Locally, it was here, so Berlin, Maryland, Del Mar, Maryland, in which we did not actually get to tour. We were following up with added members of the Lewis Police Department. Other examples were not here per se, mostly Chicago, one in Arizona. They were a little bit on the larger side, but the ones locally here, at least on the front end of the one, we do have general areas, but unfortunately they do not include site work. So like the acreage of those sites, not all that information is known to us, or have been redacted from that of public knowledge just because of security reasons.
But I would think for a 9,000 square foot building and associated parking and probably stormwater management, I mean,
And secured parking too.
Right, you're probably talking about an acre to an acre and a half.
That's what I was thinking, yeah.
At a
And
minimum.
we can check that because we're working with Newcastle, City of Newcastle right now, and they have an existing facility, and they have all those components, the sally port, the parking, the stormwater management, and it's along the lines of what you're talking about. I can't remember how big that building is, though, but we can find out about that.
Thank you.
How quickly can you mitigate the safety issues that are there existing now
In terms of the storage in the actual hallway itself.
and the water situation?
Transport of people.
Right. I mean, ultimately, a lot of that's going to come down, for what our recommendations, at least at this point, a lot of it's going to be more or less finishes, furnishing, stuff like that you guys invest in. In terms of the storage itself, that's going to come down to a delicate decision of what spaces are you guys willing to give up. That way you can consolidate the storage into one of those rooms rather than having it in the hallway itself, as well as the issue with the water itself. We are looking into that one, so hopefully we can amend that sooner rather than later. Unfortunately, I can't give an exact timeline on that one, but
The water, just to give a little more background on the water, we had a water issue last year and replaced one of the sump pumps. One of the things that we did identify that happened in this week and a half ago is there's 2 sump pumps in the basement. The other one failed. So that was replaced. So now the sump pumps, at least, we're hoping, and with the last heavy rain, we did check, and there was it was not wet. We pulled the flooring up in the weight room, which is where the water problem was the worst. And, again, they've done a structural inspection. I think from our perspective, the issues that we need to deal with are issues that are, regardless of who inhabits the space, we're going to have to deal with, such as the water, and the flooring and the plumbing, and so those are kind of the things that we're looking at. Our hope is that with the new sump pump, that gives us some time, and then if we can come up with a plan that diverts at least diverts some of the roof drains. One of the other things that we observed is the between the parking lot and the building, there's sidewalk area.
Right.
And the sidewalk area in some places slopes toward the building. So one of the things we talked about was pulling out the concrete there and putting in either just landscaping or possibly a rain garden that could manage some of the roof drain water. So those types of things would address that, but we also have like flooring, painting, plumbing fixtures and things like that. And we have started to gather pricing to make the space work for the next, I'm going to say 5 years. If we are going to look to relocate, that's not an immediate process. I know that we're all aware, and we've talked about that the Army Reserve Center will be vacating. The federal government has, and I think we all kind of have our eye on that, and our fingers are crossed, we're saying our prayers, all of those things. But the federal government has their land disposal process, where the first step in that is there another federal agency? So while municipal government is not low on the list, we're also not at the top of the list. So we kind of need to see how that process goes. At the same time, I think we need to be looking at what other locations are there and thinking about the functionality of a police station needing to be where you can quickly get to various areas of the city. So you don't want it kind of tucked away in a corner somewhere. So that's going to take some time. So in the meantime, we're looking at probably between furnishings, flooring, plumbing, painting, new lockers. We're looking at somewhere between $85,000 to $90,000 at least in renovations.
And that has nothing to do with space.
And it's primarily cosmetic, but would deal with, I think by taking the weight room and repurposing it, because nobody actually uses it as a weight room, that can deal with some of the storage issues.
I have some questions. I have toured the police department, so I have some familiarity with it. The chief took me through at least once, one big tour of the building, so I'm a little familiar with it. I'm somewhat aware of the deficiencies that presently exist. My question to you as the architect is, are there opportunities here for your creative side, the design guy, to make better, efficient use of that space. I'm thinking of what I call the cubicles or the workstations for the policemen.
Right.
The lighting is woefully deficient. It's a very old school design, where the modules are brought in and plopped in a space. Is there, in modern architecture, in modern office space design work, are there options that we could reap the benefits that have not been considered, that we are not aware of at this point in time, that you would know of as an architect?
I mean, there's multiple options to proceed, how to handle the situation. The issue then becomes, at the end of the day, you're still hemmed into a 6,000, give or take, square foot building, which is still grossly deficient for the total amount which they need. Which, even though as we're talking about, well, say if we remove a wall, reallocate, or regroup things, you're still, at the end of the day, still going to be short.
Yes, I'm aware of that.
And I'm not trying to downplay that. The issue is becoming, they still need more space than what the site can offer for the actual police.
So even, for example, that area where, as Anne Marie described it, the weight room area, which is basically wasted space right now because it's not used, it's not utilized at all.
Right.
That to me seems to be something that would be targeted for reclamation, for repurposing.
Right, and that can very well assume the role of the...
And that's not an insignificant amount of
good space, correct.
Right. It's the largest single room in that building, I think.
Right.
Well, so what the chiefs looked at that as a location for employee lockers, so that there's I mean, if you look at the locker rooms, they're very deficient. So that was the idea behind how we would use that space.
And I appreciate the chief's suggestion, and I appreciate you for sharing that with me. But I would like to think that possibly the guy who does design work here, standing in front of us, might have a different take, and he might have another solution.
Well,
I don't know anything about your skill set, but
when we walked through before, I mean, there were a number of things that we identified that we could do that would include moving walls, relocating walls. But once you get into relocating walls, you're talking about a lot of money for something that still isn't going to get you that much more time or programming space. So
It is what it is.
I think if we want to invest in kind of because I think other than moving walls, kind of repurposing that weight room space with lockers and storage and doing the cosmetics is probably the best we can do on a 5-year horizon.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, we talk about that locker room space, but we also, those bathrooms are so deficient right now that we might have to utilize, if we were to go forward with a real improvement program in that facility, we might have to utilize some of that locker room space just to make those bathrooms big enough to get them out of their deficiency. And I think you hit the nail on the head there, that it's this thing that, how much money does the city want to put into a facility to upgrade it by moving walls and doing all these other things to make it slightly better for 5 years' time, and then you're still, on the other end, butting up against the 6,000 square foot deficiency, and you're also looking at maybe someplace else to be located. So I think it's this kind of cost-benefit analysis that we're in the middle of, and we sort of settled into making some improvements in the order of $90,000, and let's try to make it through 4 or 5 years until we figure out a different plan.
I like throwing money away, though.
yeah.
One of the things that,
But the toilets
so
don't work.
the lockers, for instance, are just under $47,000. If we do the lockers, they can be moved to the new location.
Well, these would be the kind of lockers that Rehoboth has and so forth, that style. Thank you.
So a lot of what we're looking at, and frankly, the plumbing improvements regardless of who occupies the space, they're going to be needed. So, we're trying to look at what can we do that will buy time, but also be, look, one of the things that what was brought up was the primary restroom is right outside the break room.
Right.
And it has no ventilation.
Right, no fan.
I mean,
I don't know how that got through
that-
approvals. That's not code compliant.
it's been there a long time, so, and so
It never
we
has
need to do the things that are going to make it
A livable situation.
livable while we solve the
But
big
when you
problem.
bring this forward for final consideration by the council, I think you need to break out what is fixed expenses and what can be moved.
Right,
Because it will show a different picture than just saying $90,000.
Right, so
Because
we,
the average person will think, you're spending
That-
$90,000
it's
on
a
a building, you're
waste.
going to walk
It
over.
has to be transferable.
so we
Some of it,
just got, the cost estimates that have been gathered by our maintenance staff, Ellen, Lorraine, and I just received them late yesterday afternoon. So we haven't even, and I don't know if the chief had seen them before that. But, we haven't had an opportunity to sit down with the numbers that we have, with Allison and Rick, and with the chief and the lieutenant to kind of say, okay, what's what here? So, this is a dynamic process. We know that we have things, and that doesn't include anything that we do with, say, diverting the roof drains.
But the estimate that we have, the $90,000 that you spoke of, does that address the roof drains? Does that?
No.
No. So it doesn't-
Just to give you a sense, right now, I've got an estimate that includes just under $7,500 in flooring. That does not include the weight room floor. So we're probably $15,000 in flooring. Office furniture of about $25,000. And lockers that are $46,500.
You have to almost 100,000 already.
Right, and that's where the big numbers. But
When can we expect to see this, like a timeline and everything in front of us? For consideration of moving?
Well, so Ellen, Lorraine, and I have talked about in September, October timeframe, you guys are going to see a budget amendment, and we'll look at components of this in that with kind of a larger plan of here's what we anticipate. But, like I said, in addition to hoping and praying that we can get the Army Reserve Center, I think we also need to look at where is there available land
Site acquisition.
that would be
Okay.
appropriate.
There's a lot more we've been talking about a while, that's why I'm keen to kind of get.
Right, we need to, right.
Unworkable
And just a
condition.
bug in your ear, if there's the next development.
Down the road, maybe we work with a developer to segment off part of their land for a new police facility. I mean, I've seen it done in other places.
Of course, yeah, it's been done.
One last question you brought up in the very beginning around whether we're even compliant or not around the Sally Port. Chief, maybe you can speak to this. Do we need to have some kind of temporary, is that something you need, to be compliant?
We need it. There's lots of accreditation standards that, we won't meet, but based on our physical plant, we just can't, and they understand that. But as we move forward, and for modernization purposes, it's a requirement for police departments. Yep.
Okay.
Before you consider taking that sidewalk that you said is planted toward the building, and putting in rain gardens, I don't think you want to put any more water against its foundation.
Right.
So I would take the sidewalk out and put it so it's canted the other way, and put it back in solid sidewalk, rather than creating anything that's going to bring more water into the
I
ground.
think we're going to look at what Charlie's recommendation is, given he deals with where water runs all the time.
Anything
That's what you're saying, yeah.
anything that dumps more, that's going to cause more water to permeate against the foundation is going to just exacerbate the problem. so.
Exactly.
Especially the French
Is that
drain.
French drain on the outside or the inside? I can't remember now. It's outside. Okay.
Yeah.
What was that, it's outside?
It's outside. It's outside.
French
the
drain?
foundation.
It's outside the what?
Foundation.
Okay.
So it's on the exterior of the building, not
Right,
on the interior.
right,
That's what he's getting
right.
at. Yep.
Yeah.
So,
And, okay, is there any way of, never mind, I'm in the weeds, I'll hold the question. Thank you.
so I think there's a lot more to learn about the police department.
Thank you.
This is going to be, I mean, this is going to be a big priority moving forward, you know, both administratively and as we come back to you guys.
Right.
All right, so we still want to talk about additional charging stations, is that correct, Ann?
Well, so the next thing that we have on, it is under current projects, vehicles and equipment. So, Lorraine, do you just want to give an update on where we are in terms of the current budget and what we have in the budget for vehicles and equipment and where we are with that?
So in the municipal street aid, we budgeted for a leaf vac. That leaf vac has been on order, and we're hoping to take possession in November. That is less than $100,000. I believe we budgeted 102 for that. It's coming in around 100. The other thing that we put off putting in the budget, but we are in need of, is another trash truck. We did a letter of interest saying that we are interested in it. The trash truck, we're being told, is expected in Delaware October and could be operational by November. We looked at a 7-year lease on that, and it's coming in at around $35,000. That has not been budgeted. If we wait to get a trash truck, it takes over a year because of the delay.
So the cost for the 7-year lease is $35K?
Yes.
Per year.
Per year.
Oh, per year?
Per year.
Per year.
Per year.
Okay.
It's
Is that for the
$214.
maintenance of the truck?
No.
We can still do that, okay.
Yes.
So right now we have 5 trash trucks.
Yes.
What are we going to get rid of?
The 2005.
Okay. And what's the potential resale value of that truck?
About $3,000.
Okay, that's fine, I
Because
just was
it's-
asking.
yes.
You wanted one, right?
Yeah.
It's a intervention.
That's okay, but it's still something you're going to liquidate. We're not going to
Yes.
have 6
We're not
trash
going to add
trucks.
to the fleet. We're going to maintain the size of the fleet.
Okay.
Just keep.
And is this a trash truck that you have a crew on the back end working?
Yes.
Or what? Okay, and what is the decision or the conversation, the evaluation of the use of, I forget what they call
Automated?
the automated one, thank you.
The automated trucks are very difficult to use in the areas of town that are not relatively new development.
Right.
Because they're tighter, you don't have the room for people to necessarily put the can out
Right, I can
at the
appreciate
curb.
that.
So, like, for instance, if you were to run an automated truck on Lewis Beach, you'd still need somebody to go around and pull out the cans. So, for the cost of the truck, it doesn't give you that value that you would need.
How many of those trucks do we have?
We have one automated truck, and it does recycling on Mondays and trash on Tuesdays. And it does,
Right.
the relatively new development, the pilot towns, I think Bakeries,
It's down my street for a while, and then it disappeared. We were back to Cruz. And I'm in a subdivision with large lots that would be a perfect candidate, which is not, it's just kind of adjacent to Pilottown Village and Pilottown
Right.
Park and the reserve and so forth.
And sometimes, so, we have to look at the entire route.
Yeah.
And when we purchased the automated truck and we looked at, was there opportunity to use it beyond, really one route, there isn't another full route that could really use it. So it would, and it's possible as new development comes on and things change that load will shift.
You've got
Right.
White Meadows Pond, you've got Pilot Beach.
Right.
You got Lewis Waterfront Preserve that will come on, that's
Right.
another 89 units.
Right.
So,
Tower Hill.
Tower Hill.
But that's, in terms of being in town, that's a ways out.
Yeah. Yeah. But we're growing that kind of
Right.
client base, so to speak.
Right.
Right. Okay. So please, and are the costs, what's the cost, the unit costs of the automated trucks? Where are they in relationship?
They're more, I
They're
think.
close
they're
to
in-
100,000 more, or 50,000 more, 50 to
Yeah, I would
100.
certainly say 275.
Yeah, but then, of course, there's a savings because you don't have the labor
Right,
associated with it, and the
exactly.
insurance costs and
Right.
all that other stuff. Right, the benefit package of those.
That is brought forward.
Right.
Something else that we are thinking that needs to be explored is the maintenance vehicle.
Yes.
And that would mean obtaining, because we didn't budget for that either, it would be a truck outfitted with storage on it to contain the equipment necessary to maintain buildings, city buildings, bathrooms. And that's coming in around $60,000.
And does that maintenance, do we currently have a maintenance truck?
We do not. We use currently a truck that's in maintenance, but it is not outfitted with the supply cabinets in the bed of it.
This is
That
one of
would-
Rick's asks, right?
Yes.
I remember talking about these.
Yeah, I
Yes.
remember this.
So can that be a lease vehicle, or is that an outright purchase vehicle?
It's probably more cost-effective to purchase it because we would keep it longer, in my opinion. Regardless of purchase or lease, they're the same price,
Okay,
around
but what's
$60,000.
the lease cost?
That we
$60K.
would need to look at because we've been leasing over 5 years.
Right.
Just guesstimating, I'd say over $1,000 a month for that because of the price. You want to order a vehicle like that with the body already outfitted versus retrofitting it
Right, of
because of
course.
warranty issues
Right.
with that.
But you might want to get a price on leasing it, just already outfitted.
Well, with that, you have to pay the aftermarket price, which it would be the storage containers in the bed of it.
Okay.
You can get factored into the overall leasing, but that's extra on top of the.
Just out of curiosity, I mean, we struggled many years ago when we first went to a leasing of a trash truck, found out that it was much more efficient for us to lease a trash truck. And it may be, you may look at a longer lease than 5, you may look at a 7-year lease.
So the leasing of, the leasing arrangement we have on trash trucks is different than the
understand.
fleet leasing. And I don't know if we would be able to get that type of lease. We haven't, we looked at it more through the fleet lease.
Are you suggesting that that kind of truck would not be available under a fleet lease? Is that what you're suggesting?
I think it would be, after the 5 years of the lease term is up, we would have to get another one.
Yeah.
So it's not like we could move it to another, get another vehicle. We did also look at the option of taking a current truck in the fleet and outfitting it,
Right.
but there's no warranty
Yeah.
for that.
How
So
many
that-
miles a year put on this kind of vehicle? I hope we're capturing that and what our costs are.
Captured.
We are, let's
Age,
see if
yeah.
I can identify. It looks like now 1,500 to 2,000 miles.
Per year. So the truck would have very low mileage at the end of a 7-year term, lease term.
Well, in most cases, when a lease is up, we have the opportunity to buy it at a discounted price.
You would buy the residual value of that.
Exactly. And depending upon what the residual value is, it may be, a lot less. So, you may want to think about it. The other thing is, can this be an EV vehicle? And we've been looking at EV vehicles, and I know there are trucks and buses and everything else that are EV, and is that something we should explore?
I think the needs of the department may limit that possibility. They're wanting to outfit it with electrical outlets. They wanted to have a, what is that, compression?
Right, air compressor.
Air compressor on it, so,
A winch on the front.
and they would be getting rid of a vehicle that's,
Vehicles. We had police vehicles in the budget for replacement, and that's another one where we connected the chief with our enterprise contact for the fleet leasing, and we are in the process, we actually have a meeting scheduled to follow up with the chief. I think he seems to prefer an outright purchase to a lease, but we need to understand what factors go into to his thought process so that we can, ultimately do what makes the best sense.
Do we know what any of the surrounding communities are doing versus lease versus purchase?
The only one I know that's doing lease is Georgetown, but they're very pleased with it. And one of the things that comes up periodically from the police department is the issue of take-home vehicles for officers. And I think if we were to try to move in that direction, the fleet leasing would be the more economical option because it keeps your costs stable. One of the things with the fleet leasing is they do not like to include the maintenance costs. Like for our vehicles, we can get the package where it includes all the maintenance. They do not like to do that for police vehicles because of the type of use.
So we're typically able to maintain in-house anyway, right?
But for the most part, we're looking to improve that capacity. The other thing is that we are looking to move the police fleet to hybrid.
Oh, yeah. I was going to ask how that's going.
So-
Happy with that truck so far?
As I haven't heard any complaints, so
It looks good.
have you heard any complaints?
I'm sorry, I didn't.
Have you heard any complaints about the hybrid?
No.
Okay, good. All right.
Let me ask about the take-home thing. If that was the case, would that alleviate some would that free up some parking, or would it free up a space for one of these sally ports?
I'm not sure that it would fix the Sally Port problem, but I think it would definitely free up some parking because for each officer, they bring their personal vehicle, and then you also have the entire police fleet.
Would it free it up to the tune of like $200,000 lot across the street?
Probably not.
I don't think we could do that.
That's actually a good question.
14 spots, I think is what it said.
Yeah, 14 spots.
Where do the police park when they do come report to work?
Right here.
Right over here.
Not to mention the extra cars that are sitting for the other shift. Yeah,
That's my point.
you're close to 14
So how
spots.
many police vehicles do we have now?
Excuse me, Mayor, they are city employees. Why are they not parking on Schley?
That's another conversation.
That's a whole can of worms to.
That's another conversation.
Well,
Your management.
so I will give you kind of a little bit of history on the parking over on the side of the building. That had been apparently for a number of years kind of unspoken police parking, so it wasn't ever officially designated as police parking, but others didn't park there. And then one day we came in and there were police-only parking signs along the side over there, and we had an employee who got a ticket, and we had some discussion, and the decision I made was that half of it could be designated for police and the other half needed to be open.
Okay.
And that's kind of where we are. So
I think that's a discussion that needs to go. It's not appropriate for the Finance Committee, or the Capital Projects Committee.
Right.
Okay. All right. Anything else? Well, how many police vehicles do we have?
I'm showing there's 9 in the fleet, and I believe 6 are patrol.
Okay.
right.
9 existing.
Right, and then we have the lieutenant, the detective, and the chief take-home vehicles.
Part of the 9.
Yes.
Plus they have the meter EV vehicle.
Yeah, that's not included in the 9.
Okay, and then we
And nor is the
then
Metro.
they have 2 ATVs.
Yes.
They have 2?
They
And where are they
one's
They have
for-
one. Okay.
One's for lifeguard and one is for
Right.
the police.
So there is one for the lifeguard that's only used during the lifeguard season.
Correct.
So technically it belongs to the police department, so we have 2 ATVs.
Technically, I guess it belongs to the Parks Department.
Now, yeah.
Okay.
Where do you carry it on the books?
Under
The,
lifeguard.
yeah, under lifeguard.
Okay, so that's Parks and Rec. And so the maintenance
Well,
comes in?
lifeguard has their own department.
There,
Yeah.
from a budget standpoint.
All right, well, anyway, we've got plenty of vehicles right now. And with the adding of new officers, are we anticipating we're going to have to grow the fleet? Or are we going to use what we have?
As far as I know, we're maintaining the fleet.
At this point, that is the discussion we've had, but, again,
I think you can anticipate there will be a request to grow the fleet in next year's budget.
yes. And again, as we work to compete for officers to come here, and a lot of the neighboring communities having take-home vehicles, that surfaces periodically as well.
Right.
So if you were to give every officer a take-home vehicle, you then would have 13 vehicles.
Well, 15.
15.
Right, because we increased.
Yeah. So that would be quite an additional expense for the police department's
Right.
budget.
Right.
Okay, I think we need to be aware of those kinds of
Right.
numbers going into this before we get to
Right,
budget.
so we haven't endorsed that.
I know.
At all.
But I think it's fair to anticipate that that will be a budget request.
It comes up periodically,
Yeah. Okay.
so.
Okay, great. All right.
Okay.
We have just like 10 minutes left here.
So-
we're going to go beyond the 2 hours
Right,
allotted.
so I guess one thing is the addition of EV stations in our lots. That's something that we can work on at the staff level, figuring out, and just bring something forward. So
I think if there is an option to get the 6 meters at a 90% reimbursement level or grant level, I think we ought to pursue looking for it. I think we have ample, looking at, Mary Vessel's, not Mary Vessel's, but it's Canal Front Park, 1812 lot. And if we were to go ahead with this lot over here on Franklin, you've already got 6. And then we talked about the possibility of adding additional ones over on the beach at,
Right.
so,
And Melody is working on, I think she's working on putting a proposal together for Milford, so I can ask her to, since she's gathering the information on that, I can have her work on that for us. Fisher Martin House, we're still waiting on a proposal. Harper and Sons, who's doing the Rollins Center restrooms, has agreed to provide a proposal, but we have not received it yet, so I need to follow up on that.
just for make sure everybody's on the same page, we have $26,000 in reserve for maintenance of the Fisher Martin House, is that right?
Yes, I would say that's a good figure.
Okay. And that's money that's been on the books for a long time,
It's a separate
specifically designated for maintaining the Fisher
Yes.
Martin House.
And that's just carried year to year to year without...
Right.
Right.
It's its own separate fund in the budget.
Right,
Okay.
right. But we don't draw against it each year,
No.
correct?
No, but we anticipate that when we do get a proposal, that the scope of what needs to be done there will exceed what's
Right.
in that.
May I ask a question about that particular project, that particular building? Has Charlie or Dean had an opportunity to do an evaluation of that building to address its, its structural needs and concerns?
I
We're gonna look at it.
thought Morgan
Not
walked through,
structurally, though, I don't think.
I thought Morgan walked through with Harper and Sons when they
To
did
the best of
that.
my knowledge, when it was initially brought up, we had something else come up and we could not assess it at that time, so
Okay.
our sons did on their own. Since then, I don't know if Morgan.
Okay, so we'll,
Okay, let's follow up with that, please.
Yep, I'll follow up with Harper and Sons.
Thank you.
the other thing, and this was something that was in the maintenance department request for this fiscal year that we did not fund, is they have a roof leak in the garage building. And when we looked at doing the break room, and Morgan went over and evaluated, what would need to be done to put the break room in that building, the determination was made that the building was beyond its useful life, and that, investing a lot into that building is not necessarily a great idea. So we need to figure out, and I guess, we'll have either Dean or Morgan take a look at it, but, we do have some leaks there, but even in the block wall, there are areas where there are cracks, between the blocks. So, again, as we start on this Schley Avenue master plan, I think we need to look at kind of, is there something better we should be doing?
What is the surface of the roof? Is it metal, is it
Tar,
rubber, or what is it?
It's a metal roof.
Metal.
Okay. So has it been looked at, is it a flashing problem? Is it actual?
Yeah, has that roof been serviced at all? What is the maintenance schedule of the roof?
To my knowledge, I don't think it's been serviced. I know we looked at replacing it with metal, and we also looked at replacing with asphalt shingles. And the asphalt is a cheaper option, but I don't think it's maybe the best option.
I don't think the roof has enough of a pitch to it.
Right.
So I think that's all that Allison has been able to do with it at this point.
And how old is that building?
Over 30 years old.
it's
It might be over 50 years old.
I think
It's over 50 because I remember it being there. So.
Okay. Do you know, Ellery, what kind of costs are we incurring annually or every 5 years to maintain that building?
They've been minimal.
Yeah.
Some things we've done, put up a wall in there just to divide some space to keep it heated. But as far as, they may have even painted the building.
Nothing
but
to speak of.
Nothing that's been.
So maintenance might have been deferred, is what you're suggesting also?
I'm sure that there was.
Right. Well, Mr. O'Donnell?
I mean, I went through it.
It's
We
caught up to
started
it.
working on the break room 2 years ago or so. I went through it, and, I mean, it's ready to be replaced in my opinion.
The whole building?
Yeah.
Right.
And to make sure I understand which building we're speaking of, because I've toured that area too, I want to make sure it's clear. Is this the building where Rick and Allison's offices
No.
are? It's not that one, it's across the street.
Across the street.
Correct. Where
It's a block building.
yeah, I just want to make sure I had it clear in my mind, because there is a break room in where.
Well, that's where we ended up building the break room because the cost of investing in that building far outweighed the worth of the building.
Got it. Thank you. I just wanted to make sure I was not confusing things.
And then I think the other mention, which the other item on this agenda is the Schley Avenue master plan, and we are working with Austin and Press to come up with this, and we expect to have something. And I think, Charlie, you already started doing some more.
Kind of a kickoff meeting, not yet scheduled, but it'll be not the next week, but the following week.
Week after Labor Day?
Yeah, I guess I need to talk to you and Austin about it. Do you want to participate? Now, I guess I would like for everybody who's going to have a decision in it to at least be part of the kickoff. Not everybody.
No, I want to be there.
We know that.
No, I would suggest not the council or anybody. I would just say, staff. I was just thinking, right now I'm working with the board, but I'd like Anne Marie to be part of it as well.
So with the maintenance building, based on what GMB's assessment of it, that should now become part of the master plan in terms of potential replacement?
I think so. And the other thing, as we look at that, one of the complaints we get, and I will say, the trash trucks were there first, but is the trash trucks back right up to the trail, and they don't always smell very good. So there, as we look at this,
Swap the
there may be, right.
Right. That's kind of what I was getting at. Maybe just put up a Butler building or something.
And there's some other purposes that we haven't yet been able to accommodate for, like, material storage.
Exactly.
The board's got the battery going into the power plant, so that's part of the, it's going to be part of this Schley Avenue discussion as well.
You're planning on repurposing that building, is that correct?
Well, it's the garage part as far as, it's definitely the garage part where the batteries and the transformers will be located.
Yeah, I heard that discussion. I wasn't quite sure if that had.
Yeah, the old part where the really, really old generator engines were located, in my opinion, I feel, and where the water plant used to be, I feel like that could be repurposed, but I don't know what anybody else.
What are we
is
talking
saying.
about?
The old water plant and these really old.
My understanding is that the DPW had some tentative plant, like some sketchings, essentially, we'll call them.
They were talking about using it as like sort of like the way we use the Rollins room now at one time, but that's
But that
been
never went
a
into
really
it.
long time.
But now,
ago. It's like
now
10
that the
years.
batteries are going into half of that building,
Yeah.
that's a whole nother story.
Yeah, that building is, that garage with the really tall roof is, in my mind, it's always been separate from the really old water plant generator
Well,
plant.
the generation room is another whole story. They're very fond of it being a historic structure, but the question is,
Yeah,
how can it be repurposed?
yeah, that is.
And it's
that would be part of
one
the
story.
discussion.
So Charlie, getting back to your your statement a minute ago, you're hoping
To have a meeting with I'll call them stakeholders, staff people, as well as BPW, sometime during the next 30 days.
All that meeting, it's not really, it's just a meeting to kick off the project. It's not really a meeting to get a whole lot of input from a lot of different sources. I just want to make sure I know what the goals of the project are with Emory and all
It's
that.
about defining the scope.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, it's different, very different.
Okay. Melanie, you've been very quiet all morning. Would you have anything you'd like to add to this conversation?
No, I took a lot of notes, and I'll probably be tapping either Anne-Marie or Andrew just for some more clarification and discussion.
Okay.
Thank you, Brett.
No problem.
Thank you very
I
much.
think Austin left us some time ago,
Yeah.
so he may have had something else. All right, well, thank you very much. I think it's 11 o'clock, and we've had a very good discussion here today. I think we've got some direction. Charlie will be back, and looks like we're going to expect a budget amendment in sometime in October.
September, October, yeah.
So, all
We
right.
talked about is possibly bringing it forward in September, but we may need a special meeting.
If you're going to do that, you're not going to be ready in 2 weeks to bring that forward. So I would say, if we need to have a special meeting in October or in September, we'll figure that one out.
Did you get your copy?
It came in the mail.
Okay? There's anything further to bring forward?
I'll make a motion.
Okay, so we can adjourn.
Okay.
All right.
So moved.
Thank you very much. Have a good day, good afternoon.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dean. Thanks, Charlie.
Thanks,
Yeah,
Dan,
Charlie,
Charlie.
thank you very much. Pleasure meeting
Thanks,
you.
Ellen Lorraine.
If you need help getting that right now.
I'll tell you in a minute.
Okay.
I've been sitting